So today I'm doing a review of African Women in Revolution. When I brought this book, I was really looking to get an overview or maybe even just details of the way that women participated in revolution and what the struggles were, what they were struggling for, and just to help me as a woman in revolutionary organization know my history. You know what I mean? So it was basically a book to figure out what my history was. Um, so the book goes over revolutionary struggles on the continent of Africa, and it focuses on Algeria, Kenya, Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, Angola, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. Now, some of these actually made an armed struggle revolution, and others just kind of moved into or stated they were revolutionary. Um, and the ones that actually made armed struggle did make proclamations during the revolutionary armed struggle period about what they saw the society being like after the revolution, the armed struggle portion of the revolution. Because what is a revolution, y'all? Like, a revolution, you make a revolution because you are not happy with what society has for you at this present time. And you have these ideas and theories about the way that life should be. And so you make a revolution, and the armed struggle part of the revolution is to get your oppressor out of your way. Get their policies, their procedures, their laws, whatever they've enacted. You want to just dismantle that shit, throw it out the window, and you want a new, fresh plate in order to carry out the theories, ideas, the systems that you've created, and you think would make society better for yourself and the people around you. And so this is where we are with this book. It had a very long introduction that gave us the background of the way that women participated in these revolutionary armed struggles. So it starts there. What were the aims and objectives of the revolution overall? How did women participate in the revolution? What struggles were made during the armed struggle portion of the revolution? What did women demand during that time? I mean, because overall, women and men wanted to get the colonizer off of their back. They wanted to be free from colonial rule. And so that was the main goal of all of these revolutionary objectives. But then there was a second level of revolutionary struggle, right? So the women, prior to making an armed struggle, saying, I'm going to do this, women in society were relegated to a third class. So first there was the colonizer, which is usually white people. Then we have the policies that the colonizer enforces that somehow give men more power in society than women. So even though you're a colonized subject, if you're a colonized male, you still have more privileges than colonized women. And so things were kind of versed in your favor. And then you have the colonized women who basically operated like, you know, third class citizens, and they had to get permission for doing things. They didn't have the same rights to land, the same rights to education, the same ability, rights to work. And of course, this was just a mimicry of the colonizer society. White men being on top, white women being second, and then they replicated or they put laws into place that mimic their own society in colonies. And so what this book observes is how women, the first introduction on how women had to struggle within the revolutionary armed struggle process to be movers and shakers of this. They wanted to be full participants in making this revolution. They didn't want to be relegated to cooking food and sending notes. They wanted to carry guns. They wanted to be fighting in the field. They wanted to be a full participant in the revolutionary process, not just somebody that's onlooking. And there were women who stepped up to the plate and made those struggles. And then when it reviewed each particular country, it shows how the revolutionary process allowed for women and how they allow for women to participate. And also how women asserted themselves in this process. And women who asserted themselves in the revolutionary process during armed struggle had their lives enhanced after the armed struggle portion of the revolution. So the introduction, which is about 30-40 pages, just goes into how women made that struggle, how they were allowed into that revolutionary armed struggle, and so on and so forth. And so the rest of the book, which is, are the chapters, goes into each country, and how the role of women were enhanced or held back after the revolution. And it goes into what were some of the policies that were enacted, what were the active things that the post-armed struggle government, the revolutionary government, tried to institute to ensure that women were equal movers and shakers in shaping society. And in countries like Guinea-Bissau, the PAIGC, which was the Revolutionary Party, declared in their constitution, declared right out the gate, even during the armed struggle, that women were a part of this revolution. Women had equal opportunities to be movers and shakers and on the front lines and creating policy during the armed struggle portion of the revolution. So after the armed struggle portion was completed, there were systems and commissions put in place to ensure that that struggle was to continue. And those women had objectives to ensure that the rest of the women in that country was going to be pulled into that process. One of the main things that this book really goes into was the process of educating women, because one of the things is that the women constituted the largest part of the population that was illiterate. And when you have a woman that's illiterate, there's a limitation to what she can contribute, how she can understand what is happening, how she can participate herself. And so there was really like large-scale education campaigns that came into play. And that was just one of the things. So what the book really does well is explain how this was happening. This struggle between equal society, post-armed struggle, was happening at the same time that the rest of the world had things going on. How imperialism and capitalism affected the way that revolution was to continue in these countries. So external forces like the IMF, World Bank, and all these structural adjustment programs, and also how nearby countries, like in the case of Angola and South Africa, the South African apartheid government went to undermine the Angolan and Mozambican revolutions after armed struggle and derail it from transforming society to putting their resources toward fighting off an external aggression as opposed to transforming and continuing. And I really, really appreciated having that vantage point where I can see the economic policies, and it brought home really what's necessary for Africa and African people to win their liberation really was to, and it comes down to that question. It comes down to the realization that, me being a part of a revolutionary organization, understanding African internationalism, that the enslavement and capture and colonization of African people is what created capitalism and imperialism, that you can't get free from the colonizer and have all these free ass, these enemies and colonizers around your country, because they're going to continue to try to infiltrate you. So what you have to have is a worldwide African revolution in order for true revolution, in order for true freedom to happen. And there were just so many different ways that I was just writing notes. I mean, look at my like folded pages. You can't see all my highlights, but I did highlight like sections of this book that I was like, oh, I gotta reference this when I'm doing political education, because we need to understand this. And this whole section around the IMF and World Bank and structural adjustment programs and how they work to create an economic colonization of, after you get free, how policies outside of your country create poverty inside your country, because the rest of the world is capitalist. They don't want to see you become socialist or communist, because that's going to affect the way that they're able to do business. See, the more people, the more countries that are communist, the less power that the capitalism has. And so capitalism in the countries that, are for gung-ho for capitalism, worked double time to ensure that Africa did not become socialist. Because what that would do is remove the resources from their grasp and out of their way, and be, because right now the resources are being used to enrich Europe and the United States, and so the resources are not available to African populations themselves. And so when you have socialism and a communist objective, those resources are going to go back toward educating the population, building up their infrastructure, doing a lot of civil service and social programs that was going to bring the population up to a standard so that we have a revolution really happening here, and it's going to transform society that way. Instead, a lot of these countries fell victim to an external aggression that they just did not have the manpower or the solidarity from other African nations to fight off. And so this was all happening at the same time that we're trying to figure out what's the women question post armed struggle post armed struggle revolution. And what I did learn was that it's not a women's issue. Like, women, we do have to struggle, but like, we can't struggle for equality in society when the entire society is oppressed. So that means you're going to be struggling for equality within an oppressed, limited society. What needs to happen, and it can be happening at the same time. What needs to happen is an overall struggle against the forces that oppress you, and that could include the men in your population that's oppressing you too. But it has to be a principled, objective struggle that is going to create a society where we're going to be on equal terms, and we're going to participate in the equal way. So I do recommend this book. I do recommend this book for readers who are looking to understand the history of African struggle, the history of Africa in general. I think the history of Western imperialism and European colonialism, and just have a more in-depth understanding of why Africa is the way that it is today. Why are we still suffering from poverty? And it just gives you that history lesson that you will not get in school. Because when you have a dispersed African nation, you don't have African historical content. You have to search for that shit. So if we had all these books in one location, it was a part of our national education as African people, we would be in a much better place. So y'all need to read more. I need to read more. We just need to understand our role in the society and how the external forces have continued to keep us oppressed, and what we really could do to shirk off that oppression. So thank you. I recommend it. Definitely give it a read. It's a very good book.